Stress is what happens in my mind and body when something that I care about is at stake. It's human, it's normal. It is not a sign that I am ill-equipped to handle my life. It's not a sign that I'm a terrible parent or I'm not up to this job or I should just give up now. It's a sign that I care. My body and brain are trying to get me to pay attention to what matters. And my body and brain are also trying to help me. Even the parts of stress I don't like a racing heart or feeling lonely and wanting to connect with others. All of those symptoms are really just your body and brain trying to push you toward coping strategies that can help you. And to recognize that and to say in this moment, I'm going to focus on what I can do, what I can choose, who can support me, and the meaning that I can choose to make out of this. That's the mindset that really seems to be the most useful mindset towards stress.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Better Together. When you know better, you get better. Oh, man. Happy hump day, everybody. Man, time is flying. Our quote of the day, chasing meaning is better for your health than trying to avoid discomfort. And that is from our guest, Kelly McGonigal. I'm so excited. She is a New York Times bestselling author, popular health psychologist. She has done a lot of work on stress, a lot of research. Her TED Talk has some 25 million views, and you're going to be so surprised at what she says today and what we're going to learn. I'm very excited. She talks a lot about willpower, something few of us seem to have in life, and how we can make stress our friend. So here we go. Thank you, as always, for joining us. If you haven't joined our Patreon, please do. We will make it worth your time. So click the link in the summary. I believe if you go to the link in my bio on Instagram, you can get there as well. So let's do this.
Like, why did we get there?
Dr. Kelly McGonigal is one of the most frequently cited inner conflict psychologists working today. New York Times bestselling author, Stanford professor. She's revolutionized research around stress, and her TED Talk, like I said, has over 25 million views. Oprah Magazine named her the first O visionary. Hey now. She says that simply shifting our mindset around stress can have dramatic consequences on our physical and mental health. You're going to die when you hear this. And today she's going to help us reprogram our relationship with stress. So Dr. Kelly McGonigal joins us from Northern California. How are you?
I'm doing great. And it is so great to be here and so wonderful to meet you.
Thank you. I'm so excited. I have to ask first about how the fires are. I mean, is it near you? Is the quality of air really challenging right now?
It is near me. I'm maybe a couple of miles away from an evacuation zone. I've been really lucky. Wow. We're just dealing with the air quality, which is not great, but I do have family who are, packed with their go bags in a much more threatened evacuation zone. So, it's another one of those sources of stress that we have no control over. It seems like that is what the world is asking of us these days, to figure out a way to deal with it.
Yeah, it's like compounding stressor after stressor after stressor. Well, I hope everything turns out okay for your family and for all of the families up there. I saw one of the fires had been 70% contained. So hopefully that will end soon. But when you talk about that, and this is what you do for a living, how do you guide those family members to make stress their friend when they have to pack their bags and leave their home and not know whether they're going to go back to it?
That is such a great question. So let me tell you, if I started to give a lecture to my family members about why stress is good for you and how you can get good at it, I think they would hang up and be like, don't want to hear that right now. It's actually, so there's a really big difference between like when we're thinking about how to help ourselves, and we'll talk about all these mindset resets that you can do versus when you're trying to be there for someone else. And that's when the mindset reset, like you do it within internally. And then you just try to show up and support. So, when I'm talking to my family members, and we recently had a death of in the family about a week ago, and there's that extra stress of There's no funeral. There are family members across the country who can't be with one another. I can't be with the family members who are most devastated by this loss. And again, it's in those circumstances, people don't want to hear, oh, stress could be good for you. What they want is for you to have a presence where you can hold your own feelings of worry and stress and anger and overwhelm and make room for something else, like how much you care about your family member or how you believe in their strengths and their capacity to get through this and your willingness to try to help them. That's a mindset that really is about making room for reality and then looking for not so much the good in the situation, but the good in us, the good in others, and the good in our community that we can draw on that stress often points us to, or that stress reminds us that we sometimes need to tap into.
Wow. I never thought about it like that, where it's less about kind of giving them these tools and all of that in that moment and more about you giving them space to not have your baggage, because we all have our stresses and our stuff. It's about you knowing what your role is in that moment. I like that.
That's such a great way to put it. I mean, so a lot of my research has been on compassion and why it's difficult sometimes to help people we care about. Because we get our own stress when we see other people suffering, when we see other people in pain and stressed out. It's natural if we care, that stress, that their suffering is going to be a little bit contagious. And then we have our own stress response to deal with, our own emotions to deal with. So a big part of what it means to be good at stress is to find a way not to then make it their job to help you reduce your stress, that you found tools for accepting your stress, letting the stress remind you what matters most. If your heart is pounding, like I like to say, okay, this means my heart is in it. Okay, so I don't need to calm down or tell other people I can't deal with their stress right now and don't put it on me. I just think my heart is pounding because I care. My heart is in it, and choose to turn my attention to how I can help or how I can connect.
Wow, I love that. I'd love to talk a little bit about the research around stress. It's what you led your TED Talk with, and I think for the benefit of the audience who hasn't seen it, it's so cool. And so I'd love for you to explain that.
Yeah, so this was a study. So let me preface this by saying I'm a health psychologist. So I was always taught that stress was the number one enemy. And if you want to be happy and healthy, you have to avoid stress. There is no alternative, which can be a pretty big, if you think about that as your task in life, that's a pretty hard challenge to take on, to avoid stress. But it seemed like that's what, we knew from medicine and psychology. Stress is bad, avoid
stress
it, reduce
kills.
it. So I've been out there as a health psychologist teaching people that, talking about that. And then in 2011, right when I was in the middle of teaching my Science of Stress class at Stanford, this study was pre-published that totally rocked my world. Because this was a study that followed about 30,000 adults in the United States. And at the beginning of the study, they asked them how stressful was the past year. And they wanted to know, is it true? Does stress kill? So they were planning on following these people for the next decade to find out, if you have a really stressful life, are you more likely to die by the end of the decade? But they also inserted this interesting question I'd never seen before in any of the research. They asked them, do you believe that stress is harmful for your health? So they had those two different questions. How stressful is your life? And do you believe that stress is harmful? And then they followed people for a decade. And so what they found is that for some people, having a very stressful life increased their risk of dying by, I think it was something like 43%. But that was only true for the people who at the beginning of the study also said they strongly believed that their stress was harmful for their health. And the people in the study who had the most stress, but didn't strongly believe that stress was harmful, they were actually the most likely to be alive at the end of the decade. So it was this really weird paradox. For some people, having a stressful life seemed to increase their risk of dying. For other people, having a very stressful life seemed to increase their longevity. And there was something about what we now call stress mindset that was interacting with stress. Now, this was, an epidemiological study. So you can't necessarily say for sure. What this study proves is that if you think stress is bad for you, then you're more likely to die. But the reason that this study stood out to me is it suggested that how we think about stress and how we talk about stress can be at least as important as whether or not you're able to achieve some stress-free life. And since most of us cannot achieve a stress-free life, especially now, the idea that how you think about stress, that you could find a way to think about stress that reduces the harmful effects of stress, for me, that was so empowering. And that was just the first of so many studies. So now it's a decade later, and there's been so much research really supporting this stress mindset effect, that there are ways of thinking about stress that can help you avoid some of the most harmful effects, and that can also help amplify some of the positive effects of stress.
So I just want to make sure everybody understood. The people who had very stressful lives but believed it was harmful died.
Well, they were more likely to die, yeah.
At a higher rate than those who didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are other studies. There's also been studies showing that the same was true for cardiovascular disease over 2 decades. In other studies, you see findings like people are at increased risk for depression, for getting sick in times of stress, for getting burnt out in the workplace. That there's a way of thinking about stress that I'll put it like this. If you believe that stress is always harmful, if you believe that stress is a toxic state, and as soon as you find yourself feeling stressed, like in that moment when you're saying, this is so stressful, or you feel that muscle tension or whatever's going on in your body, and your immediate thought is, this is wrong, this shouldn't be this way, and I'm now in a state of mind and body that is pure poison. That mindset amplifies all of the negative effects that we usually associate with stress. And the mindset that seems to really help people reduce that and be more likely to experience meaning when life is stressful, or joy when life is stressful, or personal growth when life is stressful. The mindset isn't, please make me suffer more, please bring on more horrible stress in my life. The mindset is, stress is what happens in my mind and body when something that I care about is at stake. It's human, it's normal. It is not a sign that I am ill-equipped to handle my life. It's not a sign that I'm a terrible parent, or I'm not up to this job, or I should just give up now. It's a sign that I care. And my body and brain are trying to get me to pay attention to what matters. And my body and brain are also trying to help me. Even the parts of stress I don't like a racing heart, or feeling lonely and wanting to connect with others. All of those symptoms are really just your body and brain trying to push you toward coping strategies that can help you. And to recognize that and to say, in this moment, I'm going to focus on what I can do, what I can choose, who can support me, and the meaning that I can choose to make out of this. That's the mindset that really seems to be the most useful mindset towards stress.
So stress is a sign that I care. That's the quote.
Yeah. Well, because you don't have a stress response to something that you don't care about. And one of the other pieces of research that I like to share with people is that when you ask people, how meaningful is your life? Like, just, is your life meaningful? And then you measure stress all sorts of different ways, that people who are more likely to say their life is meaningful also report higher levels of stress. It's one of like the strong links. Because think about, so what are the biggest sources of stress in your life? If you were to think about, when you go throughout the day, when are you likely to feel stressed, or what are you likely to worry about?
My parents' health and all of that. Yeah. It's because
so your loved ones, your family, maybe your job, maybe your health. And what we know is that people who have more meaningful roles, so they feel like they're of some use in the world, have meaningful goals. They're things they care about. They want to change themselves or change the world. People who have meaningful relationships, they have more stress in their lives, because stress, as I said, it is a natural human response when something that you care about is at stake. And in fact, there's some really interesting research that, although we sometimes use the word stress synonymously with things like depression, that actually people who are profoundly depressed have a super inhibited stress response system. Their body and brain are like, what's the point? That there's a sort of a lack of that drive, that sense that not only like that I care and there's something that I can do. And I think that that's worth remembering, that in those moments when we're feeling stress, I don't think most people enjoy it. I mean, there is such a thing as good stress, but I think most of the times when we say we're stressed, we're not thinking like this is exhilarating stress, like the stress of falling in love, or no, most of us are like, this moment sucks. But at the same time, that moment is often linked to our values and what we care about. And it is an expression of who we are. And if you're getting stressed out about a lot of things where that's not true, like that's a whole different conversation. If the biggest source of stress in your life right now is, getting irritated at some minor behavior that someone is doing, and you're creating a whole story about that, that's different.
Yeah. Or if you're in like if you're in a toxic work environment, that's something to identify and say.
Yeah. And sometimes stress is telling you this is not acceptable. Sometimes I think people think that what it means to be good at stress is to be like Teflon and you can put up with anything. But often stress is like, you know what? You're worth more than this. There are alternate versions of your life available to you. And I'm going to stress you out until you have the courage to leave. And again, the better we get at listening to stress as a signal, the better we get at being able to leverage stress before we're totally overwhelmed by it.
Wow. When you talk about it, it reminds me, just the whole notion of, it's the fact that they believe it's harmful, right? I remember when I was dealing with my brain tumor and I was, figuring stuff out, Tony Robbins and I were on the phone and he was like, honey, whatever decision you make, he goes, just remember what you believe will be. And it stuck with me because he's so right. We have such powerful brains, and you study the brain. So I'd be, even more interested to know what all of that kind of looks like in your brain, but what you believe will be. So how do we utilize that knowledge to live a better life? Is it just your language? Is it your beliefs? Is it like, how do we use that?
Yeah. So, I think one of the ways that I think about this is it's not magic. So it's not like if I just think something, I can make it so. The reason that these particular mindset effects are so powerful is because your mind is in your body and your body is connected to your mind. So every time you have a thought or an emotion, it is going to lead to a cascade of changes in your brain chemistry and in your hormones. It's just like, that's a fact. And so when we see these mindset effects, it's not like wishful thinking. It's that in a moment. So let's take a less severe example. Let's say you're feeling anxious about something. You're about to have a conversation that's really important to you, but you're also feeling some self-doubt. So we know that in that moment, when you're feeling anxious, there are changes happening in your body and your brain that a lot of people fear. So their heart might be pounding, they feel their blood pressure rising, they're feeling tense, their stomach might be churning. And it turns out that if in that moment you interpret those sensations as a sign that you can't handle this, it actually begins to shift what's happening in your brain and your body towards more of a threat response, which will make you less confident, less capable of connecting with others, more defensive. It will increase inflammation in your body in a way that's not healthy. It starts to change the balance of your stress hormones in a way that's less healthy, not because you're anxious, but because you have this relationship to your anxiety where you view the anxiety as a threat and then the whole situation that's triggering the anxiety as a threat. If instead you view that anxiety as a sign that you care, that this is a moment that matters, and you just accept it, you can actually see changes in the brain and in the body that give you more confidence, that make you better able to connect with other people, that change your body language, that change your ratio of stress hormones, that reduce inflammation, that relax your blood vessels, that give you emotions like courage and hope. And again, it's that mindset. Again, it's not magic. It's because by telling yourself it's okay that I'm anxious, you're creating a whole different framework for understanding the experience you're having that allows you to perform your best, to rise in a moment that matters. And there are examples like that for like every type of stress you can imagine. there's often a way of thinking about it that it doesn't fix necessarily the situation, but it creates a different reality because it changes who you are in that moment. And then you feel different, you act different, the world experiences you differently, and you begin to create that different reality.
Whoa. That's incredible. I feel like I want to give you an example for people out there who are like, okay, I don't know how to apply it to this. So yesterday, I was in an acupuncture appointment. And the second I lay down on the table, I was like, oh, this is amazing. I may never be able to get up. The aromatherapy starting. I was like, this is awesome. Needles go in. Therapist walks out, and this terrible rush of anxiety rushes. And it was like someone was like manhandling my chest, and it was crippling. Now I went from so happy and relaxed and calm, and he's lifting my hand to like put the needles in. And I was just like, oh my Lord, I feel so good, to having to count sheep, to trying to, I kept telling myself all is well, everything's fine, this is good, blah, blah, blah. I could not shake it. What would you do in that moment to reverse engineer what's happening or get rid of it?
Yeah. Well, so the first thing I would say is you kind of have to abandon the goal of getting rid of it. I mean, that's part of what makes this mindset really powerful, is that it is about meeting the moment as it is and making room for whatever is unfolding. Mm-hmm. So, my first thought as you were describing that is the idea that you were saying to yourself, well, everything is fine, everything's okay. I mean, yeah, maybe in the smaller context of that moment, right, in that room, you could have that perspective on that moment. And also right now, the world is in crisis and chaos. And you may be dealing with things in your own life that are difficult beyond what's going on with the pandemic and politics and all of that. So sometimes I think that when we meet these waves of stress, of difficult emotions, of anxiety, it's like really important in a way, almost like to not gaslight yourself, that it's okay if you have these surges of strong emotions and feelings, because life is challenging. And sometimes when we feel most safe and most either supported or protected, that's when emotions that maybe are scary to feel are likely to show up. So for example, I also teach meditation and yoga, and I can't tell you how many people go to something like a yoga class or sit down to meditate thinking it's going to calm them down and get rid of their stress. And then halfway through the practice, they're overwhelmed by grief, or suddenly they're thinking about something that they were worried about, but they've been trying to suppress. Because in that moment, when you start to feel connected to support or to comfort or your own strength, as maybe you were in that acupuncture session, your body and mind are like, hey, like, remember this other stuff? This is also true. And maybe like now you're in the place where you can deal with it. I mean, I don't know that was necessarily what was happening, but I feel like, so in that moment, the goal isn't necessarily to push it all away and convince yourself that there's nothing wrong. I can tell you what the tools that I tend to use in moments like that. One is to turn to my breath as a resource, because for me, as somebody who is trained in yoga and meditation, I have learned to have a relationship with breathing where it centers and grounds me. Now, other people may have relationships to other things like prayer or thinking about a family member. But the idea that you can turn to something that feels like a resource in that moment that just grounds you or centers you or connects you to something bigger than yourself. And then if I were having that sort of wave of anxiety, I will often think about other people in the world who are also feeling something like this, which can seem like a really bad idea until you're in the moment of it. But to think about like the countless other people right now who are dealing with uncertainty about their health or about their loved ones, that there's so many people who know what this feels like right now. And this actually connects me to a part of what it means to be human. And then I start imagining that I could breathe out compassion and strength and hope to everyone else who's feeling the way that I am right now. And the reason why this is one of my favorite coping strategies when I feel overwhelmed, when I can't sleep at night, for example, is because it's both consistent with my values. I like the idea of being compassionate towards others and caring and helping. So it's consistent with how I view my best self. And also we know that when you shift to a mindset of caring for others, it actually changes what's happening in your brain in a way that can increase courage, can activate the reward system, which makes you feel more motivated and more optimistic. It changes what's happening in your hormones in a way that's good for your immune system. So it's almost like good medicine. And I feel like, if we were to have a much longer one-on-one conversation, I would be really curious what your version of that would be. Both what is like a centering practice for you, like I turn to the breath, and also what could you think about in that moment that feels like it's consistent with your values and lets you connect to the part of yourself that expresses like who you want to be in a difficult moment.
Wow. You're so good. You're really good at articulating everything, and just, there's so many kind of ahas every time we're going along. Like, wow.
Well, you know what, I really appreciate that. And one of the things that I like to point out is because sometimes when people hear about my work, like the upside of stress, they think that I'm an optimist. Yeah. I don't know. Like, people have ideas that, oh, maybe she's come to this work because she's such a positive person. And, I come to this work because I have whatever genetic tendencies there are to anxiety, depression, and despair. I've got them. And also, I've experienced chronic pain since I was a little kid. So I sort of live with the experience of what it's like to not be able to get rid of something that seems like it's destroying the quality of your life in that moment. And those are the two things that have really driven me to this work. So it's easy for me to get passionate about it because I feel like a big part of my life has been trying to navigate how these ideas work at a very practical level to allow me to show up.
I love that. I mean, that's why I do this show every day, is because I want to get better along with everybody. So I feel like you're doing the same thing. You have been studying something to help yourself, and you're sharing that knowledge to help other people. So now my biggest question is there are so many people dealing with chronic pain. How have you used the techniques that you've studied to help yourself so that we can share that with everybody else?
Yeah. So I really think there are two ways that I have coped with that. And by the way, let me just say, sometimes when you talk about things like chronic pain or chronic illness in public ways, I don't know if you've had this experience, you get like a bazillion emails like, oh, you just need to try this one thing.
Yeah. Or
we won't even go there.
Or you hear, you have no idea, I'm in more pain. Like, I've had the comparisons and stuff. So if you can give us a little bit of insight into what you've been dealing with so people can relate, that would be helpful.
Yeah. So the way that I like to describe it is I have a nervous system that generalizes what other people might experience as like nuanced hunger and fatigue. My nervous system seems to treat pain as like the thing to produce when my energy is low, or when I'm upset about something, or I haven't eaten in a while. My whole nervous system just like it produces pain. And that's its kind of default response, rather than like, I'm not as likely to say I'm hungry or I'm tired. It's just, it's pain becomes more pronounced. And that's been true since I was a little kid. And so I've learned the two ways to think about it. I've learned techniques that actually work on that reduce that. Things like yoga and mindfulness and changes in my diet and changes in my lifestyle that are really effective at actually reducing my daily experience of pain, so that I can so there's that. And that's the kind that I'm not really, qualified to talk about because I'm not a doctor. So there's all of that stuff, but then there's also the mindset stuff. And I will say that, the things that I'm actually more qualified to talk about from the psychology world, two things that have made the biggest difference to me. One was accepting that my life doesn't have to wait for this problem to go away, that there's not some sort of alternate reality of my life waiting for me as soon as I devote all of my energy and resources to eliminating the experience of pain, which is, of course, what people who have chronic pain, that's the great hope, that one day it's all going to be gone. And if you know anything about chronic pain, most people don't ever get to that experience. So giving up that idea and deciding that there is room in any given moment for pain and other emotions like gratitude and enthusiasm. It's like what you learn is to create a mindset that's big enough to hold things that feel like opposites. That is so, it's so funny because the first book that I wrote was about chronic pain. I worked with people with pain for a long time in the mindfulness and yoga communities. I had this down with pain, but somehow I didn't believe it was true for stress. I'd been so indoctrinated by like the idea that stress is always harmful and the enemy, that here I was making peace with pain, making room for it to exist, being able to find gratitude and joy and meaning, even in the presence of pain. And I still was convinced that that wasn't possible for stress, that stress was just so intrinsically toxic. You had to like get away from that experience. So that mindset has been really helpful to make room. And the other has been the idea of, that I mentioned, of using the experience as a way of deepening empathy with others. So, for example, like I'm in a little bit of pain right now. It's not interfering with my ability to have this conversation with you, but it's present. And most people wouldn't know that. Like most people watching this wouldn't look at me and think, oh, I bet she's got like this claw of pain coming over her face and into her head. It's invisible. And so what I learned really early when people are like, oh, you're not really sick. There's nothing wrong with you. And yet I knew my direct experience was, well, I'm feeling this. So I knew from being a little kid that people can have suffering that's invisible to others, and you don't know what people are carrying. And to have that awareness from so young has become like it's a real source of strength that I turn to, so that when I walk into any room, I can actually connect to that deep knowing that I don't know what pain people are carrying. I don't know who in this room is dealing with grief. I don't know who in this room is struggling with addiction. It could all be invisible to me, and yet really a big part of what they're experiencing right now. And so that's another mindset that has been really useful for me, that is separate from the idea of like eliminating dairy helped. Great. That's a very practical tool. And also using my own experience of pain as a way to understand the common humanity has been, I don't know, like that's, for me, that's even better than getting rid of dairy. Dairy got rid of more pain than the common humanity, but the common humanity brings me much more sense of meaning and purpose in life. So
I wonder, is the dairy thing kind of a thing that a lot of people do, or is it just in your kind of, body's chemistry that it's made a difference?
I don't know. I mean, that's the one of the things that I love about being trained as a psychologist is this idea that you can experiment and pay attention to the data. And so a lot of the things that I've done in my life that have improved my well-being are things that I treated like experiments, like let's just see. So, for example, people often vilify caffeine. I've got my wonderful cold brew with me right now. In my experience, caffeine does nothing but help. And giving it up for years didn't do anything to help me. And so I really encourage people to actually treat their direct experience like an experiment. Mm-hmm. And you can take ideas from a lot of different sources, but you have to learn how to trust your own body as well.
We talk about that here every day. Mm-hmm. It's so individual. That's why I asked that question like that, because nothing is one size fits all, right?
Yeah,
dairy may be good to remove from your diet, but not for someone else. So.
Absolutely.
Wow. So, yeah, I want to talk about willpower before I forget, because a lot of your work centers on willpower, and I want you to help us define it and then tell us how we can get more of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, okay, here's how most people define willpower. Forcing yourself to do something you don't want to do, or not allowing yourself to do something that you want to do. So no, that's not my definition, because I'm not here to like should and shame people. I define willpower as it is about being able to make choices that are consistent with your highest goals and values, yours, even when it's difficult and even when some part of you doesn't want to. So, to give a simple example, this morning, my alarm goes off. I have a commitment to exercising first thing in the morning, because I know it changes my brain chemistry. It reduces my anxiety. It's good for me in so many ways. So I have a commitment to that. And every morning when I wake up, some part of me is like, a big part of me, a loud part is like, I don't want to do this. I'm tired. I don't have any energy yet. So I don't want to do something that takes energy. And so willpower is about being able to find the energy, the focus, the commitment to make the choice that is aligned with your goals and values, and to accept that even when something matters deeply to us, there's almost always some part of us that resists it, or that is afraid, or that has self-doubt, or has some conflicting desire. And so willpower is like getting to know the different parts of yourself and finding a way to make peace with all of them while still supporting yourself in the direction of your aspirations.
I love it. My alarm went off this morning too, and I was like, hell no. But then I said, okay, I've been feeling a little bit stressed lately and some anxiety. This is going to help me. I know that movement is going to make a big difference. And for people who don't know kind of, physiologically and neurologically why movement is so important, will you share that?
Oh, yes. I mean, I am so passionate about this. At the most basic level, if you go from not having moved in a while to moving for as little as 3 minutes, it increases energy and it increases optimism, primarily by increasing adrenaline and dopamine. So you don't have to break a sweat for you to get this change in your brain chemistry and your hormones. Literally doing anything that gets your heart rate up a little bit, that uses some energy in muscles, any part of your body, you're going to get this increase in adrenaline and dopamine that makes you feel more motivated, more energized, more hopeful, more confident. And again, like anything works. But then if you go beyond that a little bit, to like the 20-minute mark, something magical seems to happen in the brain where you get an increase in endocannabinoids, the brain chemicals that cannabis mimics. But when it happens through exercise, it's a little bit different than cannabis. Endocannabinoids enhance motivation and energy and pleasure and really dial down anxiety, stress, anger, rumination. And when you access this through exercise, it can lead to a really profound reset in your mindset. And endocannabinoids also make it easier to connect with other people. And at natural levels, they really like everything from how good it feels to make eye contact with someone, to share a meal with someone, to have a conversation with someone. It all feels better and more natural. And so this is one of the reasons why I like to start my day with exercise, because, people like me, I love that you said when you woke up, your first thought was hell no. I know there are some people who wake up in the morning and their first thought is, oh, what a glorious morning. That is not me. I mean, I have the expletives in my head, when alarms go off. We all have different temperaments. Yeah. And my default temperament is not necessarily joy and connection and all of that. But exercise, it just creates such a powerful shift. And again, the thing that I want to emphasize for folks is that this is whatever you can do in the body that you have. So, it's not about you have to run, you have to lift weights, you have to dance, you have to do yoga. It's whatever part of your body can move in a way that gets your heart rate up, that gets you breathing and engaged with life. It all has the same effect on what's happening in your brain.
I love that. It's actually a really great note for me when I'm talking to my mom and I'm trying to inspire her to move. She has brain cancer, and so she's become less and less mobile. But if I tell her the stats on the 3 minutes, because you get depressed and then it's like a vicious cycle. And so I'm going to use that with her. But how do you help people find more of it?
More willpower or more movement?
More willpower.
More willpower, yeah. Okay, so I talk about willpower as having 3 parts. So the classic definition of willpower is the won't power part. Like if you really want to complain and say something and then you hold your tongue, or you really want to eat something, but then you don't have that second helping. Like that sense of saying no, that's part of it. But there's also the part of willpower that's about saying yes to investing your time, your energy, and attention in something that is consistent with your goals and values. That's like you and me getting up to exercise. That's willpower. And then the thing that I always tell people to start with is the thing that people don't even think about as a component of willpower. And that's the want power. You have to know what matters most to you, because otherwise it's so easy to fall into default decision making. You do what's easiest, you do what your habits are, you do what other people suggest that you do. So if you want to have more ability to say yes to what matters and no to what is a distraction or is self-destructive, you have to be really clear about what your goals and values are. And if you're thinking about a specific change, so if the idea of willpower for you is you want to stop vaping, or you want to have a different experience of how you're parenting, you want to be more present with your kids instead of distracted on your devices. Like if you have an idea of what that willpower looks like for you, to go back to the why behind it. Why does it matter to you? What does it say about you? How is it connected to your identity or who you want to become? What do you think the real benefits are? Not the voice in your head that says you should do this, or people will judge you if you don't do this, but like the real aspiration. If you know what that is, I know it sounds cheesy. People are like, okay, but it'll still be hard to get out of bed in the morning, but my phone will still be there and the notification's going off. Yes. And I promise you, when you're more clear about your values and goals, when that moment arises that is asking you to make a choice that is difficult, you're going to be more likely to notice it. Mm-hmm. You're more likely when the notification goes off to actually remember that you have some commitment to not getting distracted by your devices. And you're more likely to have that energy and that ability to say no or say yes.
Such great advice. Man, we could talk for hours, but that was so jam-packed. I think we're going to leave it there and ask for you to do a part 2 with us at some point, because I have a whole other page of questions that I wanted to get to. But that was just so incredibly informative and so many great tools for people to use. I can't wait to use them. And yeah, unbelievable stuff. And if you haven't seen the TED Talk, everybody, you should. We'll put that in the summary as well. And you have a new book called The Joy of Movement. Will you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So this is, a lot of people know me as a psychologist and don't know that I've been teaching group exercise for 20 years, everything from dance to yoga to mixed martial arts. And I believe, and the science shows, that exercise is one of the best things that you can do for mental health and resilience and building communities. And so the book is really, it's like a love letter to how movement can help us experience the joys of being human, cooperating, mastery, inner strength, celebration, music, and to find a way to find a version of movement in your own life that is not about how many calories you can burn to fix a body that you're judging, but that is about finding an opportunity in life that connects you to people you care about and the version of yourself that you value and want to express, and how that's possible at every stage of life. As you said, whether we're talking about recovering or being in treatment for cancer, all the way to the end of life, whether you have physical disabilities, severe mental health challenges, all of it. There's a version of choosing to turn to your body as a vehicle for experiencing hope or courage or connection that is possible, whatever body you have and whatever is going on in your life. And so the book sort of looks at like, okay, show me.
I just thought of something. So there's that saying of like, all I need is within me now. And there's like a few different levels of it. And if you really think about it, you could be turning to your body as a resource, is what you're sounding like you're saying, right? Like our bodies, if we use them in the way of, okay, I move it, I get these endorphins, I get all these things that are going to fire and wire together and give me energy and confidence. And damn, I never thought about it like that.
Oh, I know we're just out of time, but let me give you the best example of that.
Yes, please.
I think about when I exercise. This is such a new scientific finding. Most people really are not aware of it. But it turns out that your muscles are like a pharmacy. So your muscles manufacture all of these different chemicals and proteins. And some of them function as antidepressants. Some of them make your brain more receptive to joy. Some of them make you more resilient to stress. These are chemicals that your muscles manufacture and they won't release them until you exercise. Wow. And when you use your muscles in any form of exercise, walking, swimming, dancing, whatever, your muscles pump out these molecules into your bloodstream where they travel to your brain and can literally change the structure of your brain to help people become more resilient, to deal with things like depression and trauma and addiction. Like, talk about using your body as a resource. How amazing is it that your muscles can be a pharmacy for your mental well-being?
Wow. How many times did I say wow today?
A lot. Me too.
Wow. I mean, that just gives me all the motivation that I need to even attack weights more and to really create that ritual of waking up in the morning. And, because I know it does help my mental health every day and the anxiety. So, but now even realizing, I could be creating like my little pharmacy, my apothecary, and thinking about it in those ways, because I wrote in one of my books too, like, it's not about being skinny, it's about being healthy. But this is like the next level of like the mental health of it all. Yeah. And I feel like your book, what's so cool is you're going to give us so many reasons we never thought of to exercise. Like if we didn't have enough reasons before, now we're going to be like, all right, no, we have to.
Yep. And not only reasons, but models. Yeah. So I go to a dance class for people with Parkinson's disease, a boxing gym for people with physical disabilities. I mean, this is a running club with a woman who's dealing with tremendous grief. I want people to know that this can take a lot of different forms. And so often we have these barriers and these obstacles because life is difficult or our bodies have challenges, but that doesn't have to, the joy of movement is for you. It just is.
I miss my ballroom dancing class so much.
I miss my boxing.
Okay,
so Maria and I are going to be ballroom dancing and boxing with each other now here. Just the two of us.
I am going to ask that you come back and we do a whole episode just on the joy of movement, because I think that would really be beneficial for people. I'd love to hear all those different stories and examples, and I hope we can do that. That would be fun.
Great. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. And we will chat with you soon. Thanks for everything.
Take care.
You too.
Thank you.
Wow.
Wow. Wow, 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 wow.
So good.
In our chat, I want to say was resonating so much with this. We see you guys, especially the invisible pain could be anywhere, and that generates empathy. We have people in our chat saying this advice could change my life. What a beautiful way of offering insight and compassion. So many people thanking Kelly for today's show.
Thank you,
She's
Kelly.
Awesome. But man, like I just started realizing, I just started realizing at the end, I hope you, all those chunks, I'm like, please write this down. Please write this down. But just at the end, just our body is our resource. Like it was actually a Tony, actually, he has us say, all I need is within me now. And it was like a spiritual thing. And it was like, we have the power to do whatever we put our mind to kind of thing. But if you think about it now, our body, our physicality can be a resource. And like she said, if you're paralyzed and you can move your hands, or like there's so many ways that this is possible. My mom is very challenged physically, but I'm going to push her now, even if it is just a few little bicep curls or just like a little shimmy and keep building on that. It's so cool because you forget about the endorphins and the endocannabinoids and all of that. I think it's just amazing to look at our bodies like a resource, like an apothecary for ourselves. That is major.
Major. And I love too, she wasn't pushing exercise. She's pushing movement, right? If you view it as just movement, I think that so often people have a negative connotation that's wrapped around the idea or even the wording of exercise, right? It's like, you have to exercise. Just move. Just move. 3 minutes walking up and down the stairs, just move. Like I really loved that.
So exciting.
That.
Well,
yay, Kelly.
I hope you guys enjoyed that. And if it resonated with you and you know other people that it will help, please share it with them via social media, via whatever route that is helpful for you. And
I'm hopping quickly too.
Yeah,
sorry, Maria.
jump in.
Only share it, but I know there are those episodes where you hear this and say, this could change my life. And this is one for me. And if you're having that feeling driving in the car right now, on your hike, whatever, it's so helpful for us to get on Apple Podcasts and write a review. All these reviews have such beautiful words. This episode was the one that was my breakthrough episode.
Aww.
So for those who are listening, I'm calling you out. If you're having that moment, it's so helpful. Get on Apple Podcasts, write us that review, and help other people find the show so they can have their breakthrough moments.
Because when they go over there and they see a lot of reviews, they're like, oh, maybe this is something I should pay attention to. We are trying to get to 1,000 with your help. We will get there soon. Jeff, before we go, I want to know what your breakthrough is.
I just think it's that empathy thing. So she started with compassion meditation. Her early research is in meditation. It is funny because when you study Kelly McGonigal, we will have another episode because there are 5 superhero psychology versions of Kelly. But putting out that compassion meditation and letting empathy be the thing that drives your value system, to me, that's such a beautiful way to deal with stress. Because if you can say, man, this is a tough moment for me. Gosh, there are a lot of people that are having tough moments right now around the world, and I'm connected to them through this moment. And if I get through this and when I get through this, I can be helpful to them. Yeah. That for me is really powerful.
I love it. That's kind of how I've dealt with a lot of the most challenging things in my life, where I'm like, okay, I remember being in toxic work environments and I'm like, okay, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to get out and I'm going to help other people or the tumors or whatever. So I guess subconsciously I'm doing it and didn't know, but the movement part, Jeff?
Oh, 100% too.
Do you, are you working out at all, or what's the scam here?
I felt called out on this one because
I don't feel like Jeff. I don't feel like Jeff's moving.
I know. Maybe that means I look like I've gained a little weight.
No. I just don't know if you have a consistent regimen.
Well, I need to re-implement it. I was a big runner in high school as a cross-country runner and then through college too. And I feel like Erica yesterday, how she was saying in her late 20s, she was like, I was a college athlete. I'm tired of exercise. I sort of felt a connection with her in that moment. But she also said, you need to get rid of that because exercise isn't an obligation. It's not a chore. It's a vehicle and a tool to make your life so much better. I'm feeling that. I'm feeling Dr. McGonigal's call out there. And, I love my morning runs. I just need to get back into it.
And just move. You don't have to say, I'm going to go for a 2-mile run. Just walk down the move.
I know. Today I was like, okay, I'm not going to go for long.
Yeah.
But then I went for a little longer than I thought. And I was like, okay, this is what I can handle today with my time and my schedule. But at least I did something. Yeah. And that you can keep building off of.
Yeah. So, and I missed Maria. And I was like, I'm still going to walk down the driveway.
Yep. She still did something.
I'm going to walk down this driveway.
All right, guys. Thank you for joining us. As always, you can follow us at, actually, did we give her plug? We did. Her new book is called The Joy of Movement. It is found wherever books are sold, and we will put the link in the description below. And that is it for us today. Follow us at Kelly McGonigal on Twitter, at Kelly Marie McGonigal on Instagram, at Jeff Crane Graham, at Kelsmeyer2, at Maria Menounos. And remember, be nice, people, make good choices, and be present.